Hello and welcome to Liberty Nation TV with your host, Jeff Charles. Well, it's official. The United States is in a recession. Or is it? There seems to be some confusion about the word recession as Democrats and their comrades in the activist media are trying to redefine the term. Luckily, I have with me Liberty Nation's economic correspondent and resident vegan activist, Andrew Moran, to help me get to the bottom of this. Welcome to the program, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, let's get into it. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the definition of recession. So can you settle this once and for all? What is the definition of recession?
Well, if I were to work for CNN, it would be a recession is when the Republicans are in charge, and a recession is when the U.S. is not in a recession when the Democrats are in charge. So this is amazing. So the technical definition of a recession is 2 straight quarters of negative economic growth. This has been the tried and true definition for as long as I can remember, but suddenly that's no longer the case, and now we're using all these different metrics to suggest or to confirm that the United States economy is in a recession.
Since we're looking at these different factors, is this an actual genuine attempt to really hone the definition of the word, or is this more politically motivated?
I would say politically motivated. You know, the government, the Biden administration, they went into full damage control just days before the GDP numbers were released. They said, take the GDP report with a grain of salt. Instead, look to these factors that provide us in a positive light. And some of the numbers do show that the U.S. economy is doing well. I mean, look at the labor numbers. The labor market is doing extremely well. The problem, however, is if you dive deeper into the labor market data, you show that the numbers are slowing down. You look at, for example, the initial jobless claims data that has been on the rise every single week since the middle of April. So, their definition seems as if that it's not a contracting economy, it's growth that's slowing down. It's the economy transitioning to slower growth. That's their definition, it seems.
Oh, so that's how they're trying to redefine it. So it's not a recession, exactly. It's just slower growth, basically.
Exactly, yes.
Well, I suppose that's pretty clever. I mean, it's the type of wordplay that we're used to coming from the Democrats. But it's not just the Democrats in office. It seems like the activist media is spinning hard on this one. I mean, you mentioned in your article for LibertyNation.com, you mentioned Paul Krugman, you mentioned a few others in the activist media who are trying to tell us that we're not seeing what we're not seeing, we're not seeing what we are seeing. Do you think this is working, or how is this going over from what you're saying?
Well, if you look at some of the polls, it doesn't show it's working. I mean, look at the LibertyNation.com poll. It showed that 90% of respondents said that the U.S. is officially in a recession. You look at the recent CNBC Fed survey. It showed that most analysts, most economists think the U.S. economy is tilted into a recession. You look at many of the reports of businesses and consumers and all these things. They show the exact same thing, that no one is bullish on the United States economy except, of course, the incumbent administration, which makes some sense because they want to be reelected, so they're going to put what did they say, lipstick on a pig? Is that the phrase, a common expression? So overall, I mean, I don't think it's going to work. Heading into the midterm elections, it's gonna be hard to try to show the economy is doing well under current conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose when you're saying that it's not a recession, but people are paying almost double for groceries and higher prices at the gas pump, that one of those things is more convincing than the other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there reminds me of a phrase that says that a recession is when your neighbor loses his job, and a depression is when you lose your job. I mean, many poor middle class Americans, they're struggling in this environment. They're paying 15% more for a pound of beef, or they're paying 33% more for a gallon of gasoline. So they're going through tough times. It's, of course, the ultra rich and the politicians who are doing well, but for the average person, in Biloxi, Mississippi, they're not doing well as the administration would hope.
So Andrew, what does this say about the country's economic future? I mean, are we still in for some hard times, or is there a light at the end of this tunnel, or is there any hope?
Well, the consensus on Wall Street, if you look at many of the investment firms' economic outlooks, they range from recession to tepid growth of 0.2%. You look at you look at a lot of the data that came out in July. The University of Michigan's consumer manufacturing PMI that eased. You look at the S&P Global and Manufacturing PMI that declined, and the chief economist said that these numbers have not been as bad since the 2008 financial crisis, barring, of course, pandemic-related economic data. So all the numbers, you look at the regional Fed survey data too. That's been dreadful, aside from a couple of others. But the Chicago Fed National Activity Index, the Kansas City Fed Index, the Richmond Fed Index, all those show how the economic conditions are deteriorating. And what's funny too, if you look at, let's say, for example, the Dallas Fed Manufacturing Index, you look at some of the survey responses from business leaders, and they all say the same thing. It's going to be hard to survive until 2024, and then we have 2 more years of this current administration. So overall, I mean, sentiment is not great, and that's also a big factor for recession talk. Is that if there's so much talk of bad economic conditions, that's going to weigh on growth, because that's going to weigh on, our business going to invest more, consumers going to spend more. So all this talk is just going to weigh on the overall economy.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and you're right. We do have, at least until 2024 with this administration. But in the upcoming congressional elections, Republicans are set to retake at least the House and maybe even possibly the Senate. If they do take, let's say they take both chambers of Congress, is there anything that they can do to kind of ease the pain here? Or are they kind of, roadblocked with this administration?
I think the latter. I think their only job they could have would be to serve an obstructionist to prevent even more government spending. But you have to remember the Republican Party, they contributed to this environment. They contributed with the $2.1 trillion CARES Act. They contributed with all the support they gave to those stimulus checks and all the relief and all this other pandemic era spending. So I have zero faith that the Republican Party could achieve anything to support the economy, except just to slow down the rate of spending. But anytime they're in charge, they just exacerbate things and continue spending. I liken it to with liberals, what you're going to get. You're going to get more spending and more big government. But the conservatives, they stab you in the back as soon as they get into office by just continuing the exact same things that they supposedly oppose during when they're in the opposition.
Yeah, and we have seen that time and time again. But I mean, I know people are hoping that with this new crop of people that we might have that the Republicans might have in Congress, hopefully something will change. But we'll just have to keep an eye on it and hope that we finally see that light at the end of the tunnel. But until then, thanks for joining the program, brother.
Thank you for having me.
And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news and analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. Just go to LibertyNation.com on your browser or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Jeff Charles. Thank you for watching. This program is a production of LibertyNation.com, where truth is making a comeback.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Maybe tracking polls sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.